Chapter 20. Dougal knelt down beside Colleen's crumpled form. Ember, Riona, and Cranks came up behind him. Gulick, last of all, still coated in purplish dust. Riona tried to put a hand on Dougal's shoulder, but he pushed it away. For a long while, all he could do was stand and stare at the dead Sylvari and struggle to control the anger building inside him. As he did, the thunder around him grew louder, and rain began to fall. No one said a word as they watched the drops of water start to wash the dust from Colleen. Dougal, Riona started. "I'm sorry." Dougal cut her off. "Don't," he muttered, his eyes not leaving Colleen's corpse. "We should have run," Frank said. "All of us. Any idiot could see that our best chance of surviving such an encounter was to flee." Dougal glanced up and hurled daggers at him with his eyes. "Well, it looks like one of us idiots paid the price." Frank stammered for a moment. "I tried my lightning rod, but it had an odd effect in this environment. Its metaspell solenoids are fried out now." "Aye," said Ember, "and my first 2 shots misfired before I could take out that thing's eye." Dougal's face flushed with anger and regret. "I should have dragged her away in the first place." "If you had," said Ember, "we would have left Gulick behind to fight the creature alone." "You should have," Gulick said, as he looked down at Colleen. He spoke so softly that Dougal had to strain to hear him. "I did not expect any of you to be so foolhardy as to join me, least of all her." "Stop this," Riona said. "We don't have time for it. The battle is sure to have drawn attention. The war bands that awoke the creature are still south of the Dragon Brand, and May chose to resume the chase." "They would challenge a foe who slew this beast that terrified them so?" asked Gulick. "Some char like carrion," said Ember, "only too happy to take on foes when they're at its weakest." "Regardless," Riona said, her face a mask, "we need to move now." Gulick pointed at Colleen's body. "She deserves a hero's funeral." Despite the rain falling on her figure freely now, her skin was already starting to turn black around the edges, like the petals of a plucked flower. He became the bear, and in his ursine form shouldered the sharp-edged boulder fist and rolled it off the Sylvari. Then, as a Norn once more, he knelt down and picked up the crushed form, cradling it in his arms. "If nothing else, we will not leave her body here in this damned place." Gunshots rang overhead. Dougal glanced to the south to see 3 full warbands of char starting to nose their way cautiously but relentlessly into the Dragon Brand. With Colleen gone, they only had 5 to face off against 60-some char warriors who were fresh and spoiling for a fight. Gulick looked south, rage overtaking his face, and for a moment Dougal was afraid the Norn was going to charge off to meet them in battle. Grimacing, Dougal patted the Norn on the arm. "I think we'd honor her sacrifice more if we lived." Gulick put his hand on Dougal's shoulder as they began to follow the others north through the rain. "There's no glory in fighting a few char anyway," he muttered. In the end, they laid her to rest on the northern side of the Dragon Band, beneath a cairn of rough stones covered with a thin coating of wet sod. All except Cranks did the work, while the Azura watched the Dragon Brand to the south through a set of lenses from his voluminous pack. Dougal and Ember were laying the last of the uprooted sod over the stones when Cranks came down from his perch. "The char patrols have turned back," the Azura said. "I think they ran into something in the Dragon Brand that was related to that thing that we fought." "They're not as foolish as I feared," said Ember, standing back to look at their handiwork. Dougal patted the sod into place and stood up. "Were Colleen human, I would offer a prayer to the 6 gods to guide her safely through the mist." "The char have no gods," said Ember, "but we are not stone, and were she char, we would praise her prowess and her bravery, and seek to measure up to it in our own lives." "The Azura believe in the eternal alchemy," said Cranks, "a great machine of which we are merely component parts. Parts wear out or break, but that doesn't make their passing any less painful." Gulick let out a deep sigh and said, "I met her in the forest of Caledon. I was hunting great cats there, seeking their pelt, and several of them got the better of me. I was resting beneath one of their strange-shaped trees by the roadside when she walked along. She asked me if I would like to stop bleeding. I told her I would, very much. She worked her greenish death magic over my wounds, and I regained enough of my life to accompany her to the next haven. We did not travel together long," he continued. "Yet in that time she impressed me both with her disposition and her ability. She told me about her people and how they grew on trees, and how it was important that they would find out what their purpose was in the awakened world. I told her about bear and raven and snow leopard and wolf and others of our spirits who were no more, like owl, and she asked many questions, and a few days later we parted on friendly terms. I did not see her again until that day in your room, Dougal, and she kept me from making a horrible error. The rest you know. She always was searching for her place in life, and always was curious about what happened at the end. For all our sakes, I think she found the former in this group, and I hope she finds the later in the mists of the afterworld. There was silence, the soft rain still falling around them. At last, Riona said, the war bands are no longer pursuing, but without a doubt, they will report our presence. We must move on. No one said anything in response, but one after another, they pulled up their pack and started the climb into the rolling hills overlooking the Dragon Brand from the north. By the time they reached the crest of the hill, the rain had diminished to a light drizzle, and the sun was coming out. Looking back, Dougal saw a rainbow along the edge of the Dragon Brand. They made good time once they were back in untainted lands, comparing to the earth ruined by the Dragon Brand. The springiness of the ground here seemed to propel them forward. With some difficulty, Dougal turned his thoughts to the task ahead of them. We should not have to worry much about patrols here, Ember said. The creatures bent by the Dragon Brand rarely leave it, and the Char trusts the devastated land to protect their southern flank. There may be a few sentinels here and there keeping an eye on the inhabitants of the Dragon Brand, but nothing in the way of the continual patrols outside of Ebonhawk. A solid, if flawed theory, Crank said. One that I'm happy to take advantage of. He'd resume his place on Golik's shoulders. The Norn bore him as easily as ever, immune to any abuse the Azura could heap on him, whether physical or verbal. Still, Golik was mostly silent. His thoughts kept to himself. They hiked steadily north and westward into the hills, stopping well before the sun kissed the far horizon. At length, they came to an old human farm building, partially collapsed along its southern wall, but still warm and dry along its northern half. From the debris scattered about and the ashes in its fireplace, other travelers have used this place as well. We should be moving at night again, said Ember. 2, maybe 3 nights before we reach the outskirts of Ascalon City itself. We are going to come around through the Loreclaw expanses on the southern edge of the Ascalon Basin. There are fewer patrols on the south side of the lake. The western edge of the lake may have more patrols, since that's a major artery for the Char military. We will try to avoid them and approach the city from the west. Dougal nodded, but no one seemed to be much in the mood to talk. Cranks broke out some lumpy nut bread he had brought with him and passed it out to have with their cold rations. It was sweet on the tongue, and if anything, made Dougal sadder. I've lived in Ebonhawk for years, said the Azura, but that was my first experience with the Dragon Brand. I hope to never have another. The elder dragons have warped Tyria, said Ember, picking out a walnut shard lodged between her teeth with her claw. If the ghosts of the past, the humans of Ebonhawk, and the Flame Legion were not enough, now Kralkatork has drawn his scar through our lands. My people know the power of the dragons, said the Azura. The first dragon, Primordius, made his home in a great hub of magical power. We built our central transfer chamber, a cluster of powerful Azura gates on top of that site. When the dragon's herald, which the dwarves called the Great Destroyer, woke years ago, it crippled our network and drove us to the surface. As mighty as we may seem now, it's just a pale shadow of our past. Gullik grunted. I know of what you speak, small one. The Norn once ruled the north until Jormag, the ice dragon, rose from his tomb. We fought him, but were outmatched, and we were driven from our lands. One of our greatest heroes, Asgir, battled the ice dragon, and with the aid of the spirits of the wild, lived to tell the tale. More than that, he brought back the sole trophy we have of our greatest battle against the creature, a single fang from its maw. That tooth is the heart of our settlement at Holbrook, and our great heroes test their might against it. For our people have agreed that when somebody breaks Jormag's tooth, it will be a sign for our people to rise once more and to beat the ice dragon once and for all. Kralkatork, Primordius, Jormag, said Dougal, and Zaitan, who rose in another place of power from beneath Or itself, and flooded Lion's Ark, now makes its lair the heart of the city of the gods. And for all we know, there may be more of them. It puts the battles between the Char and humans in perspective. All the more reason that we should succeed, growled Ember softly, almost to herself. We all seem to be resting on the edge, and unless we deal with our individual challenges, the dragons will consume us all. Dougal nodded. 300 years ago, humans ruled Tyria. Now with the centaur raids, the bandits, the rise of the dragons, and the draining war with the Char, the humans have been driven back to a fraction of their lands. Dougal wondered if he was a member of a dying race, like the dwarves, fated to fade from the greater world. Do we want to approach the city during the night or the day? Riona's question shattered Dougal's reverie. What? He blinked. Oh, I would rather try during the day. The ghosts are less active then. But the Char patrols will be far more likely to spot us, Ember pointed out. How did you manage it last time? Poorly, said Dougal. We were more worried about the Char than the ghosts, and slipped past the patrols into the city at midnight, on a night with a full moon. It was a disaster. But you, my friend, live to tell the tale, to sing the saga of your friends and their deaths, said Gulick, smiling wanly, and their lives well spent. Dougal shook his head. Don't romanticize it. There wasn't anything good about their deaths. We were stupid, and we paid a price. What happened? Riona's voice was soft but insistent. We should know. Dougal pondered this for a moment and looked at the others. Ember nodded in agreement with Riona. Gulick was looking at him blankly, waiting. Even Cranks had stopped chewing and sat there expectantly. He'd put this off for as long as he could. Dougal took a deep breath. I've not spoken of this before. The legend of my surviving Ascalon City grew over time, and while I've done nothing to stop it, and even have profited from it, I've never told anybody what happened there. So please bear with me, because this is one story that I cannot make myself the hero of. Gulick opened his mouth to say something, but Ember silenced him with a jabbed elbow to the rib. Dougal continued. You know, Riona and I were in the same unit at Evanhawk. One of our friends, Dak, had found the old map in some library in Evanhawk. It showed the old city itself, where the towers and reception chambers were, and most importantly, the royal treasury. We all memorized that map in case it was lost. You think the claw's in the royal treasury? Said Ember. I do, said Dougal, and stopped there, not elaborating. He was thinking of what had happened next, and then last decided to skip over the part where they chose to desert and leave Riona behind, take the blame. Finally, he said, Dak and I and some others thought we would become treasure hunters and left Evanhawk for Lion's Ark. He looked at Riona and she nodded. She was not going to bring up the matter here in front of everyone. We collected as much information as we could find on Ascalon City and then set off from Lion's Ark. Dak, Jervis, Marga, Vala, and myself. We were all close friends and hired a group of locals for added support. The adventurers from Lion's Ark thought we were going to see what we could pick up in Ascalon City. We didn't mention the royal treasury. We left Lion's Ark, crossed over the Shiver Peaks, and came down into Ascalon City, where we spent most of our time trying to dodge char patrols. They were very effective, and we lost most of our associates before we even reached Ascalon City. He let his voice trail off, the images of the past rushing up to meet him. What happened then? Asked Riona. Dougal tried to swallow, but his throat was dry. He pulled out a water skin and took a quick swig from it. The water didn't seem to help. What happened, Dougal? He looked at Riona. If anyone deserved to hear about this, it was her. She had the right to know what had happened to their lost friend. He had to be honest with her. He forgot the others were there and spoke solely to her. It was awful. By the time they reached the city's walls, only one of the Lion's Ark group was left. A woman named Caudiv, an elementalist. We should have turned back, but we decided that we hadn't come this far to go home, so we pressed into Ascalon City. That's when it all went indescribably bad. We hadn't been inside the walls for more than 15 minutes when Caudiv lost her mind. She had been a fragile thing from the start, and after seeing so many of her friends die along the way to Ascalon City, knowing that we were in a place infested with ghosts pushed her over the edge. When she saw the remains of all the bodies littered in the streets, she started wailing, and no one could get her to stop. We all stood there in a square in a haunted city, yelling at her to stop and squabbling with each other. Dak finally hit her just once. She toppled over and smacked her head on the cobblestones. We tried to get her to wake up, but she never did. Any of us might have done it. There we were, racing into a city filled with angry ghosts, and she was honestly loud enough to wake the dead. You didn't have any potions? Asked Cranks. No magic to heal her? Dougal shook his head. Maybe if we had more time, but the trouble wasn't that Dak had killed Caudiv. It was that he'd silenced her too late. As Vala knelt down to help Caudiv, the first ghosts appeared. There were probably a dozen of them. They looked much like they must have in their life. They wore old Ascalonian uniforms. They carried swords, but they were colorless. So much so that you could see right through them. When they saw us, they froze, stunned. They just couldn't believe we were there. Then they attacked. As they came at us, they wailed even worse than Caudiv had. They were mad in every sense of the word. They had no words for their anger, but they expressed it in noise and steel. You remember the ghosts of the shepherd and his apprentice? When you see a ghost, how insubstantial it looks, you wonder how such a thing could hurt you. Can a mist harm you? It seems ridiculous. But when the first ghost struck, he ran Dak straight through, and that sword of his was solid enough to bring blood up into Dak's mouth. Jervis started casting spells, but there were just too many of them. They actually picked him up, and Marga as well, and carried them away. I'll never forget their scream. They went on forever. Dougal felt his throat tighten. After a moment, he continued. Vala gave up on trying to help Caudiv and turned her attention to Dak. I left her with him while I tried to rescue Jervis and Marga. I followed their screams. By the time I caught up with Jervis and Marga, the ghosts had taken them to the main square. The place was filled with scores of ghosts, an entire army of them, and there, up on the battlements of the palace, loomed the ghost of King Adalbern, shouting at his dead soldiers. I climbed up the side of a building so I could get a better look. Marga was already dead. her body pulled apart and being tossed about like a rag doll by the spirits. The ghosts were pulling pieces off Jervis, a joint at a time. I had a bow with me, and my first arrow caught him in the chest, which only hurt him more and alerted the ghosts that I was there. I fired a second while they turned to charge at me. The third finally caught Jervis in the throat and put an end to him. You killed Jervis? Riona spoke so softly that Dougal could barely hear her. He thought about pretending that he hadn't, but then nodded. It was the best thing, the only thing I could do for him. Closed his eyes and tried to banish the look on Jervis's face when the final arrow hit home. It had been a look of gratitude. Bear's blood, said Gulick, solemn but insistent. Don't stop there, man. What happened to the others? I raced back where I left Dak and Vala, but when I got there, all I found was Dak, dead in a pool of blood. What about the woman? Asked Ember. Dougal hadn't been sure the Char was listening. I never found her. I looked, but I heard her screaming for me once, screaming for me to run, but it was cut off. I tried to keep looking, but the ghosts found me, and the pursuit began. Crank shook his head in disbelief. So there you were, alone, and caught between a legion of Char and an angry army of ghosts. What did you do? I did what I had to. I left. I fled like a dog in the night. I ran from Ascalon City and made my way back to Lion's Ark. We had told some people where we were going, and when I turned up alone, the story started, and a lot of people wanted to hire me since I had survived the city of ghosts. But they never realized I had failed, and those I cared for had paid the price for that failure. Dougal put his head in his hands and discovered that his face was wet with tears. He had no idea how long they had been there. Riona put a hand on Dougal's arm, and he did not have it in him to brush it away. I know, she said. I'm sorry they're gone as well. They were our companions, our patrol, our teammates. They were more than that, said Dougal. There's something else I have to tell you. He stressed the last words as he looked at Riona and fished out the locket around his neck. Something I should have said before. Dougal opened the locket and sighed as if he hoped that he might finally get rid of his last breath. Vala, he said, looking at the cameo. Sweet, beautiful, wonderful Vala. What about her? We were married right before we left Lion's Ark, Dougal said, his words falling like hammer blows. Vala was my wife. He looked up to see Riona scowling at him. Her eyes burned with anger and grief in the dying light of the setting sun. For a moment, Dougal was sure she was going to strike him, and he wished she would, but she didn't. Rather, she stood up and stalked off, grabbing her traveling cloak and wrapping it tightly around her, settled in the doorway of the ruined house, her back to the rest of the group. Dougal stood up now, unsteady, wet-faced, and took 2 steps towards her. Gulick looked at him hard and shook his head. Dougal froze, then nodded in agreement. There was no comfort he could offer her, not for this. Instead, the Norn picked himself up, walked over towards the shattered doorway, setting himself down against a crumbling wall, not too close as to crowd the human woman, but not so far away that if she wanted to talk, she would have to raise her voice. Ember and Cranks laid out their bedrolls without comment, and with muttered goodnights, stretched themselves out. Dougal sat by the cold fireplace for a long time. As the sun died, he knew he would not get any rest before they had to move on.